Many people are crazy about the rebellious spirit of heavy metal, but sometimes that rebellion goes way too far. These are the unbelievable stories of metal stars accused of heinous acts that shattered their careers and shocked their fans to the core. One star's actions were so bizarre, they involved setting historic buildings on fire. Honor Varg Vikernes. When you talk about the darkest corners of heavy metal, one name always comes up: Varg Vikernes. As the mastermind behind the black metal project Burzum, he created some of the most influential and chilling music in the genre. You see, his sound was new, raw, and full of a strange, cold atmosphere that fans had never heard before. He was a pioneer, a true visionary in a scene that was all about breaking every rule. But not all things are what they seem. The thing nobody tells you is that the darkness in his music was spilling over into his real life. Varg was a key figure in Norway's early black metal scene, a small, tight-knit group that quickly became famous for its extreme views and even more extreme actions. What many overlooked was that this wasn't just about music anymore. It became a movement. In the early 1990s, a series of mysterious fires broke out across Norway. Ancient wooden churches, some hundreds of years old, and national treasures were burned to the ground. This is why this is huge. These weren't accidents. It was a statement. Varg was eventually connected to several of these fiery acts. But his most shocking act was yet to come. He was involved in a growing feud with his former bandmate from the group Mayhem, a man named Euronymous. The conflict came to a head one night in 1993. Varg drove to his apartment, and a violent encounter ended with Euronymous losing his life. Varg claimed it was self-defense, but the evidence told a different story. He was found guilty and sentenced to 21 years, the maximum penalty in Norway. He became a legend for all the wrong reasons. While Varg's story is one of dark ideology, our next musician's alleged plan was much more personal and twisted. 2. Tim Lambesis. For fans of modern metal, the band As I Lay Dying was a giant. They were at the top of the metalcore scene in the 2000s, known for their powerful music and surprisingly positive lyrics. The band's frontman, Tim Lambesis, was seen as a role model by many. He was muscular, tattooed, and seemed to have it all: a successful career, a family, and a legion of devoted fans. The band was even nominated for a Grammy Award. But behind this perfect image, a dark story was unfolding. In 2013, the metal world was rocked by some unbelievable news. Tim had been arrested. The reason was so shocking, it was hard to believe it was real. He was accused of trying to hire a professional to end the life of his own wife. You see, the couple was going through a difficult separation, and Tim was apparently worried about losing his children and a significant amount of his money. The thing nobody tells you is just how far he was willing to go. The professional he tried to hire was actually an undercover police officer. The conversation was recorded, and the evidence was undeniable. Tim had given the officer his wife's address, a gate code, pictures of her, and $1,000 in cash as a down payment. He told the officer the best time to do it would be when he had the kids, giving him a solid alibi. To put it mildly, it was a cold and calculated plan. When the news broke, fans were in disbelief. How could the man who wrote such uplifting songs be capable of something so dark? He pleaded guilty and was sentenced to 6 years in prison. His crime was a shocking betrayal, but what happens when the allegations are so disturbing that a band's entire legacy is erased overnight? 3. Ian Watkins. In the early 2000s, the Welsh band Lost Prophets was on top of the world. They had a unique sound that mixed hard rock with catchy melodies, and they sold millions of albums. Their frontman, Ian Watkins, was a charismatic rock star, adored by fans around the globe. They played massive festivals, and their music videos were all over TV. To many, they were the next big thing, a band destined for arenas. But in 2012, the music stopped. The thing nobody tells you is that a dark investigation was closing in on Watkins. Police raided his home, and what they found was beyond anyone's worst nightmare. He was arrested, and the charges were so heinous they are difficult to even talk about. Watkins was accused of a series of horrific acts against the most innocent of victims, including babies. It was a level of evil that is almost unimaginable. What many overlooked during the band's rise was the secret life Watkins was living. The evidence against him was overwhelming, including his own confessions and disturbing digital files. The details that emerged in court painted a picture of a true monster hiding in plain sight. This is why this is huge. His bandmates claimed they knew nothing about his secret life and were completely disgusted and heartbroken. When the truth came out, they immediately broke up the band, saying they could no longer play music under the name Lost Prophets. The band's music was pulled from the airwaves, and their legacy was forever tainted. Watkins was sentenced to a very long time behind bars, a small comfort for the lives he destroyed. The case of Ian Watkins is one of the darkest in music history, but sometimes the accusations hit a band that has spent decades building a legendary name. 4. Carl Logan. For fans of classic epic heavy metal, the band Manowar are true gods. For decades, they have been known for their louder-than-hell music, lyrics about battles and honor, and a fiercely loyal fan base. They call themselves the Kings of Metal, and for many, they are exactly that. Their guitarist, Carl Logan, joined the band in 1994 and had been a core member for over 20 years, shredding epic solos for massive crowds all over the world. But in 2018, the Kingdom of Metal was shaken. News broke that Logan had been arrested months earlier, and the charges were deeply disturbing. He was accused of possessing illegal and forbidden images of children. You see, the investigation had been quiet, and the band had continued to tour as if nothing was wrong. When the public finally found out, the shockwaves were felt throughout the metal community. The thing nobody tells you is the sheer volume of the material involved. The evidence against him was substantial, and the case slowly moved through the legal system. For 2 years, his future and his place in the band hung in the balance. Manowar eventually made a statement saying that since Logan was unable to perform, he would not be playing with them. To put it mildly, it was a quiet removal from the band he had been in for a quarter of a century. In 2022, he was finally sentenced for his crimes and was ordered to serve time in prison. It was a sad and sordid end for a guitarist who had played on some of the genre's most epic stages. It's always a shock when a modern musician faces these kinds of charges, but our next story takes us back to one of the founding fathers of heavy metal. 5. Dave Holland. Judas Priest is more than just a band. They are an institution. They helped define the sound and look of heavy metal in the 1970s and 80s. With classic albums like British Steel and Screaming for Vengeance, they became global superstars. Behind the thunderous dual guitars and Rob Halford's soaring vocals was the powerful drumming of Dave Holland. He was the engine of the band during their most successful period, from 1979 to 1989. After he left the band, Holland faded from the spotlight, giving drum lessons and living a quiet life. But in 2004, his name was back in the headlines for all the wrong reasons. The former rock legend was standing trial, accused of serious misconduct against a 17-year-old boy who had been taking drum lessons from him. The student had a learning disability, making the situation even more disturbing. You see, the thing nobody tells you is that Holland maintained his innocence throughout the trial. He claimed that the accusations were completely false, a fantasy made up by the student. But the court heard a different story. The jury was presented with evidence and testimony that painted a very different picture of the former rock star. What many overlooked was that the private life of this musician was far from the rock god image fans remembered. After hearing all the evidence, the jury found him guilty. He was sentenced to 8 years in prison. It was a shocking fall from grace for a man who had been a member of one of the most beloved bands in metal history. Holland's crime happened long after his fame, but in the world of black metal, the crimes often happened at the peak of a band's dark power. 6. Bard Faust Eyþór. In the cold landscape of Norway, the black metal scene of the early 90s was an explosion of creative and destructive energy. At the heart of this movement was the band Emperor, a group that would become one of the most respected and influential black metal bands of all time. Their drummer, a young man who went by the name Faust, was a key part of their groundbreaking sound. His real name was Bard Eyþór. His drumming was fast, technical, and brutal, a perfect match for the band's majestic and chaotic music. But as with many in that scene, the darkness was not just in the music. In 1992, a terrible event took place in a park near the Olympic Village in Lillehammer. A man was found after having passed away from a violent encounter. For over a year, the case went cold. The police had no suspects and no leads. The thing nobody tells you is that the person responsible was hiding in plain sight, a rising star in the underground music world. It wasn't until the arrest of Varg V. Kernes for his own crimes that the truth about that night in the park came out. Faust was brought in for questioning, and he confessed. He admitted to the act, claiming a man had made an unwanted advance towards him, and he reacted with extreme violence. To put it mildly, his reaction was beyond brutal. He was convicted and sentenced to 14 years in prison. Emperor was left without a drummer, and another member of the scene was behind bars. It was a shocking chapter in a story that was already filled with fire and chaos. Faust's act was a moment of brutal, impulsive violence, but our next story involves a crime that was planned and carried out by an entire band. Sieben Hendrik Mobus. While Norway's black metal scene was getting all the attention for its shocking acts, a similar and perhaps even more disturbing scene was growing in Germany. One of the most notorious bands from this movement was a group called Absurd. Their music was raw and primitive, but it was their ideology and actions that made them truly infamous. The leader of the band was a teenager named Hendrik Mobus. In 1993, Mobus and the other members of Absurd committed an act so cold-blooded it's hard to comprehend. They lured a younger boy from their school into the woods. What many overlooked is that the victim considered these boys his friends. He looked up to them, but they had other plans. They ended the young boy's life in a cruel and calculated way. Their reason? They claimed he was annoying and was going to tell people about their band's criminal activities. This is why this is huge. There was no remorse. In fact, they seemed proud of what they had done. On the cover of one of their demo tapes, they put a picture of their victim's final resting place. While in prison, Mobus continued to run his record label and gave interviews where he mocked the boy he had taken part in dispatching. He was eventually released, but his legal troubles were far from over. He violated his parole and fled the country, eventually being caught in the United States and sent back to Germany to serve more time. His story is a chilling reminder of how deep the darkness can run. The members of Absurd showed no regret for their actions, but our next musician was part of a group that took their dark beliefs to a terrifying, ritualistic level. Jon Nudveit. From the neighboring country of Sweden came another hugely influential black metal band, Dissection. Led by the intense and charismatic Jon Nudveit, Dissection created a sound that was both melodic and incredibly aggressive. Their albums, The Somber Line and Storm of the Light's Bane, are considered timeless classics of the genre. Jon was the creative force, a brilliant guitarist and vocalist who was deeply involved in a dark, satanic organization. You see, for Jon and his associates, this was not just a musical gimmick. It was a serious spiritual path, and its teachings had some very dark and disturbing elements. In 1997, the band was at the height of its power, but Jon's life was about to take a dramatic turn. A 36-year-old man was found in a park, having passed away from a gunshot. The investigation eventually led police to John Nutvite and another member of his organization. The thing nobody tells you is the motive behind the crime. The victim was targeted because of his background and lifestyle, which the group found offensive to their beliefs. John was not the one who pulled the trigger, but he was present and was found guilty of being an accessory to the act. He was sentenced to 10 years in prison. While incarcerated, he continued to study his dark faith and even formed a new lineup of dissection from behind bars. He was released in 2004 and recorded one final album. But his story would end in a final tragic act just 2 years later, forever linking his musical genius to a legacy of real-world darkness. John's crime was tied to a dark belief system, but sometimes a musician's bad choices are simply about personal weakness, leading to a shocking arrest. 9 Dagan. For decades, the American black metal band Inquisition carved out a unique space in the underground. With just 2 members, a guitarist and vocalist known as Dagon and a drummer, they created a massive and hypnotic sound. Dagon's strange, croaking vocal style was instantly recognizable, and their music, full of cosmic and occult themes, earned them a dedicated global following. They were seen as mysterious and uncompromising artists. But in 2018, that mysterious image was shattered. A blogger uncovered court documents that revealed a shocking secret Dagon had been hiding. He had been arrested and charged with possessing illegal and disturbing materials involving children. What many overlooked is that this wasn't a small amount of material. It was a massive collection of forbidden digital files. The news sent shockwaves through the black metal scene, a community that, despite its dark image, has lines that cannot be crossed. The band was immediately dropped by their record label, and their upcoming tours were canceled. Dagon released a statement admitting to his guilt, expressing shame and regret for his actions. He claimed he was a different person now and that he had been seeking help for his issues. To put it mildly, his apology was not well received by many fans who felt deeply betrayed. He ultimately pleaded guilty and was sentenced to probation, avoiding prison time but being forced to register as a person who had committed this type of offense. For many, the band's music was now impossible to listen to without thinking of the man's dark secrets. Dagon's crime was a secret one, hidden on a computer, but our next musician's controversial acts were often performed right on stage for everyone to see. 10th, Niklas Kvarforth. The Swedish band Shining is one of the most controversial bands in metal, and that is saying a lot. Their music, often called depressive black metal, is a painful and harrowing journey into the darkest parts of the human mind. The band's leader and only constant member is a man named Niklas Kvarforth. He is known for his intense and often unhinged live performances, where he pushes every boundary of what is acceptable. You see, for Kvarforth, a live show is not just about playing music. It's about creating an atmosphere of genuine chaos and misery. He has a long history of physical altercations on stage, both with his own band members and with the audience. He has handed out sharp objects to people in the crowd and encouraged them to harm themselves. His on-stage antics are legendary and have often been criticized as being reckless and dangerous. But the thing nobody tells you is where the performance ends and real life begins. Kvarforth has faced legal troubles for his aggressive behavior. There have been numerous accusations of assault over the years. In one infamous story, he was alleged to have given a special gift to a fan who was known to be struggling with personal demons. This person later took their own life. And while Kvarforth was never legally blamed, many people felt he had crossed a serious line. His entire career is a balancing act on the edge of performance art and genuine, dangerous instability. Kvarforth's controversial acts blur the line between art and reality, but our next artist's alleged crimes are tied to a violent, real-world political movement. 11th, Alexei Levkin. The world of black metal has a dark and unfortunate connection to some very extreme and hateful ideologies. One of the most notorious bands in this subgenre is a Russian group with a name that is spelled M8L8TH. The frontman of this band is a man named Alexei Levkin. Their music is aggressive and filled with hateful messages, and for Levkin, these are not just lyrics, they are a call to action. What many overlooked is that Levkin was deeply involved in a violent underground nationalist group in Russia. This wasn't just a fan club, it was a dangerous organization responsible for a string of violent attacks. In 2010, Levkin and other members of his group were arrested in connection with a series of heinous acts, including several that ended in people losing their lives. This is why this is huge. The group was accused of being a violent gang that targeted people based on their ethnicity. The case was a major one in Russia, shining a light on the dark underbelly of these extremist movements. Levkin was put on trial, but the proceedings took a strange turn. He was ultimately declared mentally unfit to stand trial for the most serious charges. Instead of a long prison sentence, he was sent to a psychiatric facility for treatment. He was eventually released and has since become a prominent figure in far-right movements in Ukraine, continuing to mix his hateful politics with his aggressive music. Levkin was part of a group that committed terrible acts, but our next musician is accused of acting alone in a shocking outburst of violence against his own neighbors. 12. Joe Franklin. In the late 80s and early 90s, the death metal scene was exploding with bands pushing the limits of speed and brutality. From the heat of Las Vegas came a band called Goat Lord. They had a sludgy, doom-laden sound that set them apart from many of their peers. Their bassist, Joe Franklin, was a key part of their heavy, menacing style. The band was a part of the underground tape trading scene and was building a small but dedicated following. But in 1992, the band's story came to a sudden and tragic end. Joe Franklin was involved in a dispute with his neighbors. The thing nobody tells you is that this wasn't just a simple argument over a fence or loud noise. It escalated into something truly horrific. Franklin went to his neighbor's home armed, and in a moment of shocking violence, he ended the lives of both the husband and wife. To put it mildly, the scene was a nightmare. The most heartbreaking detail of this story is that the couple's young children were present and witnessed the entire event. It was an act of senseless violence that left a family shattered. Franklin was quickly arrested and faced the consequences of his actions. There was no complex trial or mystery to solve. He pleaded guilty to the terrible acts he committed. He was sentenced to spend the rest of his life in prison without the possibility of parole. The band Goat Lord was finished, forever remembered not for their music, but for the shocking crime committed by their bassist. Franklin's crime was a sudden, violent act, but what happens when the accusations come not from one incident, but from a long pattern of alleged behavior by a modern metal star? 13. Austin Carlile. For a generation of younger metal fans, Austin Carlile was a huge star. As the frontman for the bands Attack Attack, and later of Mice and Men, he was one of the most recognizable faces in the metalcore scene of the 2000s and 2010s. His powerful screams and emotional lyrics connected with millions of young fans. He was known for being open about his struggles with a rare genetic disorder called Marfan syndrome, which earned him a lot of sympathy and respect. But in 2017, Carlile abruptly left of Mice and Men, citing his ongoing health issues. The thing nobody tells you is that a storm was brewing just beneath the surface. Over the next few years, a growing number of women began to come forward with disturbing stories about him. The accusations were serious, detailing a pattern of alleged misconduct and inappropriate actions over many years. What many overlooked was the power dynamic at play. These were often young female fans who looked up to him as an idol. The allegations painted a picture of a star using his fame and influence to take advantage of vulnerable people. More than a dozen women eventually shared their stories, some of which involved alleged encounters that were not consensual. Carlisle denied the most serious allegations, but admitted to some inappropriate behavior. No criminal charges were ever filed, but the sheer number of accusations destroyed his reputation. He has since left the music industry and has focused on a new life as a youth pastor, a move that many of his accusers find deeply troubling. Carlisle faced a storm of accusations, but never a criminal trial, unlike our next artist, whose early brush with the law had a fatal consequence. 14. Ronnie Radke. Ronnie Radke is one of the most polarizing figures in modern rock music. As the singer for Escape the Fate and later Falling in Reverse, he has built a massive career with his blend of metalcore, pop, and hip-hop. He is known for his incredible vocal range, his dramatic stage presence, and his constant stream of online drama. Many people are crazy about his rebellious, no-apologies attitude. But that rebellious streak has a very real and dark side. Back in 2006, when Escape the Fate was just starting to blow up, Radke was involved in a fight in Las Vegas. The thing nobody tells you is that this was not just a simple scuffle. The fight was arranged to settle a dispute, and multiple people were involved. During the altercation, another young man who had come with Radke's group produced a weapon and ended the life of an 18-year-old man. While Radke did not pull the trigger, his involvement in the fight led to serious legal consequences. He was charged with battery, and because of his past troubles, he was given a sentence of probation. This is why this is huge. He failed to report to his probation officer and was eventually arrested and sent to prison for about 2.5 years. This was at the exact moment his band was becoming famous. Escape the Fate had to fire him and find a new singer. Radke's time in prison became a central part of his story, and he even formed his next band, Falling in Reverse, while he was locked up. Radke's past is central to his public image, but sometimes allegations of misconduct can quietly derail a career, as our next musician found out. 15. Tillian Pearson. The band Dance Gavin Dance has one of the most unique sounds in modern rock. They mix complex, technical guitar work with screaming vocals and incredibly smooth, soulful singing. For nearly a decade, that soulful voice belonged to Tillian Pearson. His high-pitched, clean vocals were a signature part of the band's sound and helped them achieve a new level of popularity. They were a beloved and critically acclaimed band in the post-hardcore scene. But in 2022, the band's world was turned upside down. Just weeks after the tragic passing of their longtime bassist, Tim Feerick, a new crisis emerged. A woman posted a long and detailed story online accusing Pearson of serious misconduct during a weekend they spent together. Soon after, another woman came forward with her own story of an uncomfortable and inappropriate encounter. You see, the allegations hit the internet and spread like wildfire through the band's fan base. The community was instantly divided. The band responded by announcing that Pearson would be stepping away from the group to seek professional help. The thing nobody tells you is how difficult this situation was for the remaining members, who were already grieving the loss of their friend. They decided to release their upcoming album as planned, but canceled their tour dates. Pearson denied the accusations, and no legal charges were ever filed. After a period of time away, the band controversially allowed him to return, a decision that is still debated among their fans. The accusations against Pearson caused a temporary split, but for our next band, the allegations led to a permanent and immediate firing. 16. Sean Harmon. From the land down under, the Australian band Make Them Suffer made a big name for themselves in the world of deathcore and metalcore. They are known for their heavy symphonic sound, mixing brutal breakdowns with atmospheric keyboard melodies. One of the band's key features was their dual vocal attack, with one singer handling the deep growls and another, Sean Harman, providing the high-pitched screams and clean vocals. In 2021, the band seemed to be on a steady upward path. But suddenly, and without much warning, they released a statement on their social media pages. They announced that they had parted ways with Sean Harman, effective immediately. To put it mildly, fans were confused and wanted answers. The band's statement was vague, simply wishing him the best in the future. But the truth soon came out. A series of serious allegations of misconduct against Harman had been sent to the band and their management. Multiple women came forward with stories of alleged assault and inappropriate behavior. The band made it clear that they had been made aware of the situation and took the accusations very seriously. They felt they had no choice but to remove him from the group to ensure the safety and well-being of their fans and the community. No criminal charges were made public, but in the court of public opinion, the verdict was swift. The band moved on with a new lineup, forced to cut ties with a longtime member to protect their integrity. The band acted quickly to remove a member, but our next story involves a frontman whose alleged actions were known for years before they finally came to light. 17. Tyler Carter. The band Issues was another major player in the metalcore scene of the 2000s. They had a very unique style that they called R&B core, mixing heavy metal breakdowns with the smooth pop R&B vocal style of their singer, Tyler Carter. Carter was a phenomenal singer, and his talent was a huge part of the band's success. They were a popular touring act and a staple on the rock charts. But for years, rumors and whispers had followed Tyler Carter. There had been quiet accusations of misconduct, especially involving younger female fans. In 2020, those whispers turned into a massive public outcry. A wave of accusers came forward with detailed stories about Carter's alleged inappropriate behavior. What many overlooked was the sheer number and consistency of the stories. The thing nobody tells you is that some of these allegations involved fans who were underage at the time of the alleged incidents. The stories painted a picture of a pattern of behavior that had been going on for years. The backlash was immediate and overwhelming. Faced with undeniable pressure, the members of Issues made a statement. They announced that they were no longer working with Tyler Carter. They said they were aware of the situation and were taking it very seriously. Carter himself released a statement admitting to some wrongdoing and apologizing for his behavior. His career in music was over, and the band he had fronted for nearly a decade decided to break up shortly after. Carter's departure ended his band, but our next story involves a rock legend whose single reckless act had a truly fatal outcome.